Call to order the March regular meeting of the local planning agency. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mary Albright,
Steve Coates.
Ton Nguyen.
James McPherson.
Melissa Ozimek,
Robert Rennie.
Jamie Seifert.
Janet Wilson.
Everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Everybody please vote. And a motion to approve the minutes of last meeting.
So moved.
I second.
Who was the second?
Me.
All right, motion carried. Any public comments not on the agenda? All right. We're up.
Okay, this is ordinance number 2176, ordinance to rezone 120 Lowry Place Southeast from CF to MX2. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for property described as 120 Lowry Place Southeast, more particularly describing the body of the ordinance to be rezoned MX2 mixed-use high zoning district, providing for the amendment of the effective portion of the official zoning map, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is a quasi-legislative hearing. Mr. Gibson's going to speak on behalf of staff, and then I believe the applicants are here as well.
All right, good evening, Tim Gibson, Planning Supervisor for the City of Fort Walton Beach. So this project covers 3 separate parcels with 5 different addresses associated with them. The addresses are 107 and 109 First Street Southeast, 120 Lowry Place Southeast, and then 108 and 110 Second Street Southeast. But then the rest of the staff report and everything just refers to it as the property. On November 9th, 2024, Growth Management Department did receive an application to amend the zoning district for the property from community facility to mixed-use high, MX2. This property was, most people know it as the old school board property. It's been zoned CF for that purpose. They've since, the school board has vacated that. They did sell off the property. And right now with the CF, it's extremely restrictive, but that's why they wanted to move it to the MX2 zoning district on there. On December 10th, staff did identify some differences with some of what was applied and some of the information that we had on file. We did have a meeting with Mr. Ashley, myself, and Daniel Payne, the Public Works Director, to kind of go over what those were, to just kind of boil it down. Part of it ended up being a 30-foot discrepancy that was shown on some of the property lines where we felt that, they had actually their survey wasn't showing some of the property that they purchased. But in digging into that, our GIS department really dug deep into that. They did find that there was what's known as a scrivener's error on the original subdivision plat, where it did show one distance. It was measuring out at 146.75 feet, and really it was supposed to be 116 feet, or 0.75 feet. And that's where that 30-foot difference in there came in. It was identified on a survey that was done several years ago that there was a scrivener's error on there, and so that's why we were able to kind of figure that out on there. There's one other small minor discrepancy there was on the survey that was provided, there was an area indicated where that portion of the property had been vacated to the city to be part of the right-of-way, and right now we're not showing a record of that. Our GIS department is working to resolve that, but ultimately it will have no effect on this rezoning or anything else. So the survey that they have is the property that they have, and that is what we are going to be working on doing a rezoning for, is what's in that survey. So yeah, we did discuss that with the applicants. They did talk about their surveyor and everything, and that's why we decided to go ahead and press forward with this one here. So this site, the total of all 3 properties is about 7.57 acres. The future land use designation is mixed use MU. It is currently designated as a CF community facilities, and they're looking to go to the MX2 mixed use high. So for the adjacent properties around there to the north, which is the north side of Second Street, across the street from there, there is some medium-density residential future land use, and it is zoned as R2, multifamily residential, although most of the properties up there are actually single-family residentials. But again, that's across Second Street from them. To the south and to the east are all zoned as commercial or mixed use, and would be very compatible with this. To the west is a church that is also zoned as CF, which is what was existing, but we do feel that that would still be compatible there. Section 2.1.5 of the City's Land Development Code does outline the criteria for rezoning. The first is whether the requested zoning district is consistent with the future land use. And this does have our future land use already of mixed use, so there would no need to change that, and this zoning district of MX2 would be compatible there. Second criteria is if this is compatible with the uses in adjacent zoning districts, and as we just discussed, we do believe that the adjacent zoning districts would be compatible with this, having the mixed use and commercial activities to the east and to the south of this property. Next is whether the use is substantially more or less intense than development on adjacent properties. And again, this goes back to the existing on the south and the east side of the property, and then being buffered to the north side. We're not concerned about anything being more intense on here with the MX2 zoning. Finally would be is if the use is based on soil types, topography, protection of natural resources, and protection of designated historic areas. This property is not in a archaeologically sensitive area. However, all of that type of stuff would be reviewed in the future when they're doing development on the property, going through either building permit process or the development order process. So with that, staff does find that the proposed zoning is consistent with the existing future land use, that the uses within the requested zoning district are compatible with the uses in the adjacent zoning district, and that the requested use is not substantially more intense or less intense than allowed developments on adjacent properties. And with that, staff does respectfully recommend local planning agency approval to recommend city council adoption of ordinance number 2176 to rezone all the properties listed before from CF community facilities to MX2 mixed use high. Any questions? Any questions?
This is the northern boundary then of around the mound is going to swing right under this
In
proposed
theory,
site?
yes.
In theory?
We don't have any definitive answers on where around the mound it's actually going to go. That's still in the PD&E phase
Right.
with DOT. We're hoping that they have an answer for us by like the end of summer, which I'm sure you're familiar with the different options that were there. We're hoping they have an answer on which option that's going to be by the end of summer. But until then, we really don't know where it is going to be. In theory, where Eglin Parkway comes down, that was kind of the going in theory, is that's where it would tie back in. So this would be right basically adjacent to that, the south, the Round Mountain Unit south of this property. But again, until DOT comes up with their actual plan, we don't know where that will be.
Okay. And let's say it does come, whatever, I know they're working on, I think it's 1A or 1B are the two proposals that FDOT is working on. Are the setbacks associated with around the mound different than the setbacks associated with just Eglin Parkway Southeast as it is right now with respect to traffic or any other safety parameters, to your knowledge?
Not sure what you're asking about.
Well, I mean, like, could, you know, if MX2 is high use commercial or residential, there must be, are there setbacks from a roadway? And depending on whether the roadway is 2 lanes or 4 lanes, are the setbacks different? And is that something that we should be aware of?
Yes, so zoning is what determines the setbacks. It really, irrespective of what roads are adjacent to them, or even if it's, you know, a side property versus adjacent to a road. Sometimes we do have some parts in our code for like a side setback, maybe 7.5 feet, but if it's adjacent to a right-of-way, like a corner property, it's 15 feet. So that's really the only time in our code that setbacks change, and that's just whether or not it's adjacent to a right-of-way, nothing about what type of right-of-way or anything like that. Right now, this one doesn't even technically touch Eglin Parkway, so in theory, if the roundabout goes there, it would not affect this property at all. But again, we don't know what that's going to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
speak? Or do we just want to?
The applicant, I think, wants to speak. So
Thank you all for
it's quasi.
inviting us here tonight. I'm just here to answer any questions you might have. We still have no idea what we're going to do with this property. But certainly I've met with the former city manager and Tim and others to get the city's input on what they'd like to see. And
Would you want to state your name and address for the record?
Larry, Ashley, 587 Fairway Court.
Thanks.
So just here to answer any questions you might have.
Did you purchase this property as just an individual?
Yes. We bid on it along with the city a couple of years ago, and we won the bid. So.
It's in the LLC.
Yeah,
An
so-
LLC, okay.
Any questions? No questions. Anybody don't have any questions?
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion? I will make a motion to approve the changing of the, let me read it, the zoning.
I was trying to find it.
Yeah. Rezone.
Are we recommending approval to the city council?
Yes, recommend approval.
Okay, I'll second that.
Any public comments on the motion for the record? So,
All right, any public comments? Nothing heard? All right, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Good luck, do something nice.
Whatever the
It's
sky's
definitely been nice.
Pull up on car washes, storage. Not a car wash.
Or no Mexican restaurants.
I don't think maybe she's about
this is just a reason.
You can bring in Texas Roadhouse if you want to. Mattress store.
So,
Did you say mattress
to
store?
the next ordinance, it's ordinance number 2177, an ordinance amending LDC Chapter 4 Development Standards. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fort Walton Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 4 of the Land Development Code to define and establish protection requirements for heritage trees, provide for authority, provide for severability, and provide for an effective date. This is a quasi-legislative hearing, and Mr. Tim Gibson's appearing on behalf of staff.
Good evening again. So in 2019, Florida Statute 163.045 was created. In that statute, it was fairly vague, but it did state in there that local government could not require any permit, fee, or application for tree pruning, trimming, or removal on any residential property if the property owner obtained documentation from an arborist that the tree presented a danger to persons or properties. Now, there was no definition given for documentation or even what they meant by residential property. You know, there was no real delineation between, does that mean a single-family house or a 200-unit apartment complex? They're all residential, so it was really kind of very vague in there, and different places were doing, applying that very differently. I'll say at the time, our land development code did exempt all single-family and two-family residential properties from our entire landscape code requirements that had tree protection in there. So at the time when this came out, we were already exempting them from anything to do with trees, and that's actually currently what is in there right now. So, you know, like a lot of your commercial properties, if they want to go in there and take out what we list as protected trees, then they have to mitigate them by replanting on an inch-for-inch basis on the property, replanting it on an inch-for-inch basis at a city-approved property. Typically we do those in like parks or right-of-ways or something along those lines where we need some trees planted. Or they can pay into what we call the tree mitigation fund. And essentially there they just pay in per inch that they took out, and then the city takes those funds as we need them to populate trees and parks and stuff, and then we go and just do the plantings out of that fund there. But again, at present, and even back when this was passed, the 1- and 2-family dwellings were exempted from that requirement. Now in 2022, Florida Statute 163.045 was amended to provide some clarification on the items that I just talked about. So documentation was defined as an on-site assessment performed in accordance with the tree risk assessment procedures outlined in Best Management Practices Tree Risk Assessment, 2nd edition, 2017, by an arborist certified by the International Society of Arboriculture, ISA, or a Florida licensed landscape architect and signed by the certified arborist or licensed landscape architect. And it went on to define residential property essentially as being a single-family residence is what that was referencing on there. And again, this prohibits us from assigning and requiring any permits, fees, or applications for that if the tree is determined to be damaged. That's the only restriction in Florida statute right now as far as residential tree protection. So in this one, if you go into the city's comprehensive plan, goal E states that the city of Fort Walton Beach will preserve, protect, and enhance the city's natural resources, encouraging the highest possible environmental quality and the best long-standing management of natural resources. And furthermore, policy E51 under there states the city will require preservation of native vegetation species on land proposed for development or redevelopment in the extent possible. And then I did give just a few references out there from the United States Environmental Protection Agency as well as FEMA as far as like what their recommendation and some of the benefits of trees are, especially in a flood-prone area like we are here. The trees can drink a lot of water, and it even in your background there, it does discuss some things like a 1-inch rainfall from a 2,400 square foot impervious surface. One tree with a 24 or 25-foot canopy can absorb all that water in an hour. So that's where a lot of these trees are very important for the floodplain areas. There's also some stuff called urban heat island effects, which really can lower the entire temperature of an entire area just by having like the shade areas in small portions. So even the unshaded areas can be cooled by having these shaded areas. So there are a lot of natural benefits to these trees out there. To implement this, we did need to make some changes to several sections of the Land Development Code for the heritage trees. Section 4.8.1 was updated to amend the applicability of the section to include single-family and two-family residential when removing heritage trees. This section was also modified to update some of the requirements. Section 4.8.4 was amended to define a heritage tree and provide protection guidance. So in here, we did look around to a lot of different surrounding jurisdictions, counties, and just even throughout the state of Florida, looking for some places that already have some of these things in there. Some places don't have any protection for what they call heritage trees. Some places do. Primarily in the area of the city of Pensacola and the city of Panama City. They both have protection for their heritage trees. There's different definitions out there. Some of them were based on multiple charts that they had in their code, but just to kind of keep it simple here, what we decided to do was just make it a standard thing that is, if it's on the state of Florida, oh wait, I just lost it. The Florida Friendly Landscaping Plant Guide. And that's where we just basically went with a standard size for all trees that are on there. So if you have a lot of these non-native trees or these invasive species and stuff like that, we're not trying to protect those. Those can all be taken out. Those are not on the Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide. So that's where we really wanted to focus on that one, and just to provide that protection in there. We did go in here, and some of this language was, similar to some of the other areas around here as far as like the permit not being required for single-family residential properties, so long as documentation of a danger to a person or property has been submitted to the city, and then it goes into some details about what that would look like for that protection. And it does, where our code has always said protected trees, where it just added language in there now, protected or heritage trees. Because not all the protected tree list that's in our code is very small. It's actually in your documentation there. There's a lot of other trees that are on that Florida friendly list that are just not in there as a protected tree list. That is something that we are working to eventually update in here to kind of grow this list out a little bit better and kind of mirror it with that Florida friendly list. But in the meantime, that's what we're just trying to do with the heritage trees in there. And yeah, so for that, we basically, like I said, there's 3 ways to mitigate typically for commercial properties in there. They can plant it back on site, they can plant it somewhere else, or they can mitigate it. And to do planted off-site or to mitigate it, they have to demonstrate that there's not enough room on their property to replant the trees there. We didn't want to force residents, because some residents just want to have no trees in their property, and we understand that. So rather than trying to force them to plant it back on their site or anything like that, we just kind of exempted that out of there so that they don't have to do that if they don't want to. They can mitigate that way if they would like to, but if not, then they would be exempted from that. And we did put a cap of $5,000, because it's $150 per inch, which is established in our city's comprehensive fee schedule. It has been that rate for at least the last 12 years, as far back as I could see, so that has not gone up. But we didn't want, if you got some of these huge trees, we wanted to put some cap on there. That $5,000 does tie into Florida statute for some code enforcement violations where permanent damage is done. So if somebody were to go in there and not get a permit and not want to follow this, Florida statute does cap it out at $5,000. There's other fees that would be associated with there. That's kind of where we came up with that maximum amount on there. We didn't want to, be charging people more than what they would get fined if they just took it out without a permit, if that makes sense. And so with that, staff does respectfully recommend local planning agency approval to recommend city council adoption of ordinance number 2177 to amend the Land Development Code, Chapter 4, to define and add requirements for heritage tree protection.
So I have a question. How are you guys IDing these trees?
I'm sorry?
How are you guys IDing these trees? Is it just by the make of or the type of tree?
Typically, yes. So, in the Florida friendly list, there is a list of tons of different species and stuff in there. A lot of times an arborist will get involved in this, or, the companies that'll come in and remove the trees themselves. Because again, we're talking massive trees. We're not talking these small trees that, a homeowner might just go in there and take out themselves. We're talking the very large ones that more than likely are going to be an actual company coming in to do, that can identify these. They have arborists on staff that can identify these things and be able to say, these are what it is. I'll tell you again, we've had multiple arborists call over the years asking for information on this because they personally don't want to go in there and take out these trees. But they're being hired by these companies and they call us asking, hey, what are the requirements on this? What do we need to do for this? And until now, it's always been, well, it's a one single family residential property. You can go in there and clear cut it, no permits, no fees, no nothing. This is kind of try to bring that down a little bit and protect some of the trees that are out there.
I have a question. You've been saying residential, but this is only for commercial. I'm a little confused here.
So the commercial protection's already out there.
Okay.
The commercial protection is on that table that's in there. Anything that's removed on there is already protected and has to be replaced if it's a commercial or other than 1 and 2 family development. So if it's a multifamily residential or commercial or anything like that, they have to follow that already. Right now, there's 0 residential requirements. So this is going to have a larger impact on the residential side than it is on the commercial side. Now, what it is going to do for the commercial side, though, is add in there, because like I said, this list is small and not all-inclusive as the Florida-friendly list is. If that tree is on the Florida-friendly list and is of the size to be a heritage tree, then that would still, commercial, residential, it wouldn't matter. They would all be protected under that. So it would be, it's not going to be a major change to the commercial, I guess is what I'm getting at.
So what you're saying then is, let's say in the Ferry Park neighborhood, they knocked down a house on the periphery of the property or rather large live oaks that have been there since the houses were built.
Built in 55. Are these the trees then that the subsequent builder that's going to erect a new home would have to come into the city and say, I want to keep this one, but this one needs to come down because of the sewer line or...
Correct. I mean, the ones they want to keep, they don't have to come to us.
Right.
But if they want to take one of those out, that's exactly what it would be. It's to encourage them to leave those in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
So, if you have a heavily treed neighborhood that's historically a heavy canopied neighborhood, and people start moving in and decide to start cutting down the trees, there's no protection in place that would keep that historically treed neighborhood a treed neighborhood, because you're saying people could just pay to have trees replanted elsewhere. There's nothing that says if you cut these trees down that don't need to be cut down, you don't have to replace the tree on that property.
That's correct. But right now, I mean, you could go in there and clear cut that entire neighborhood and without a permit, without any fees, without anything. It currently could be done without any kind of guidance or any kind of replanting.
Yeah, I see that's been happening, but I was wondering if there's any way to prevent these neighborhoods that are all of a sudden, the trees are just disappearing because more and more people are coming in, like you said, instead of finding a property or a neighborhood that's open and buying a house in a more open area, they're coming into canopied neighborhoods, and then these, treed neighborhoods are becoming open neighborhoods. So
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you could protect the treed neighborhoods in a way.
Stop killing the rainforest.
You can, but there's a way to get around it.
Giving private property rights.
So what you'll end up having though is folks will just hire arborists to say the tree's dangerous then at that point, and under state statute, if they say the tree's dangerous, and but you can say any tree. Here's the thing: it's been litigated before, actually, by an appellate court in Florida, and they basically determined that in that case that as long it doesn't matter, even if you tell the arborist, I need you to say that tree is dangerous. As long as the arborist just signs off on it and says the tree is dangerous, then they'll allow it to be cut down. So to kind of prevent that from happening, most municipalities tend to want to give people the option. And most of the companies will self-comply at that point in time, because I had some trees cut down recently, nothing heritage size on my property, but the actual owner of the tree company was also an arborist, and actually was talking me out of, I wasn't going to cut these trees down. He's like, you don't want to cut these down, right? I was like, no. And so the more responsible tree companies tend to not want to just clear cut your yard as well, even though they'll make more money. So kind of in a roundabout way to answer your question, you could put a complete prohibition in here, but you're going to start running into some problems with that if you do that and don't give people the option of basically mitigating it by purchasing a tree off-site, and because then you'll get more actual compliance if you do it this way.
I mean, it ultimately runs down into, how far into private property rights do we go? Is really kind of a lot of what it just dives into there. Because if we say, no, you have to mitigate it and replant it on your property, I mean, it's just...
Yeah, but it's like, I guess I'm thinking of like the overlay development districts where you adhere to certain design standards. So if you are living in a neighborhood that has a certain characteristic, you would expect that characteristic stays the same. So if you buy a piece of property and you're enjoying a treed, historically treed neighborhood, and then 5 years later, because multiple people all of a sudden move in and cut down these 100-year-old trees, and all of a sudden it's completely not shaded anymore, then your property is no longer existing in what you thought it was going to be existing in. So that's just my line of thinking is, those
That just happened to me. My neighbor, they just rebuilt their house, and this huge oak tree was right on my driveway, but it was hit on his property. But it shaded, gave me canopy over my entire driveway practically. But he took it out, but he had to, because it was 20, the roots of that thing was going 30 feet into his property.
I'm not talking about not letting people cut down things that need to be cut down, but just the idea that if you're going to cut down a tree, that you wouldn't maybe have to replace it with a new one to eventually come up and shade. Like you're saying, you can just plant it somewhere else, not on your property, if we're going to say 1 for 1 or something.
And ultimately, that's what the goal is to, mitigate these things. Like I said, there is the mitigation fund, but we do try to just turn that around and just purchase more trees and stuff with that, just to keep the tree canopy in the city. I understand what you're saying about specific neighborhoods. We can look into that. I can talk with our attorney and see if there's any kind of overlay like you're talking about. I'm not aware of anything that can be done with that. Florida's a by right state, so even You know, you may have these quaint, small neighborhood with these small one-bedroom, you know, or two-bedroom houses in this neighborhood, but by right, if somebody comes in there and buys a house and they want to build this two-story, you know, full setbacks, monstrosity of a house in that little small quaint neighborhood, by right, they're allowed to. We can't go in there and say, no, you can't build that because it doesn't fit into the neighborhood, really. So there's a lot of private property rights where we just can't go in there and dictate what they have on their property. As long as it meets the land development code, then they're by right.
Except that all of a sudden it affects drainage, heat, it starts to affect the environment. So, I mean, it does have repercussions elsewhere, not just. The other question I had is the price cap y'all put on, you said it hadn't been changed in 12 years. I mean, doesn't it cost more now to buy a large size tree and have it replanted? Like,
Absolutely.
How did those prices, you said it was a Florida statute or something that?
And we have been looking at that. I will tell you, remarkably, Chris Forsetti, my director, he's been with the city for about 15 years, 14, 15 years. I've been with the city about 5 years. Shortly after I started here, there was a tree mitigation fund where somebody wanted to pay into that fund. So, I mean, naturally not knowing what I'm doing here yet, I go to him and he's like, I don't know, I've never done one of those before. In all of his time here, he had never done one. But in the last 5 years, we've collected probably even $200,000 in mitigation funds in there. So yeah, we are definitely looking at that, on does that need to be increased, because kind of the point of that was we don't want you to pay into this fund. We want you to replace these trees and keep trees, and we want to encourage that. So at the point when it gets cheaper to just, oh, I'll pay into the fund, well, that's not, I mean, we do take that and we do turn around and turn that into trees. It's just not necessarily at that property. And stuff. So we are actually looking at that as to whether or not that needs to be something that we need to increase or whatever.
Okay, so it's not based off something Florida set. It's, y'all can change it if it's needed.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the, so the city, anything we charge has to be in the city's comprehensive fee schedule that's approved by city council.
Okay.
That goes every year to them. There's certain things, like business tax receipt fees that are a lot more complicated to change, but some of them are self-imposed fees like that one. Is something we just need to, you know, next time that comprehensive fee schedule is going to go to city council, if the decision is that we need to up that or increase it to 200, 250 or whatever would be appropriate at that point in time. But we just need to make that change and then have that presented to council for them to approve.
Is that $5,000 per tree, or is that just for any all trees?
The way it's written in here is $5,000 per heritage tree removed. And yeah, we're talking, I mean, these heritage trees, we've got them defined as a 30-inch diameter crest height. So you're talking, you know, these are not your small trees. These are the massive, you know, 100-year-old trees.
And does it help her, you know, like the neighborhoods that she's talking about, would there be like, could there be like maybe an incentive to where they don't have to pay as much into it if they plant the tree back on the same property?
You don't have to pay at all.
They don't have to
Plant the
pay
tree.
I mean, really, right now, I mean, the way it's written is they've got 3 options. I mean, nothing in here restricts them from planting it back on their property. We would love that, in fact. But we just know some of these people, you know, they want to build the largest house possible on there. They want a swimming pool in their backyard with a patio around it, and they don't have room for these trees. And that's just the lifestyle that they want in their residence. You know, some people like to have all the trees around in the shade, and some people just don't. You know, they don't want to deal with raking leaves or whatever. And it's really just to give them that option. Again, the hope is that people just leave these trees where they're at, is really what this is designed to do. Because again, right now, there's 0 protections for those trees. You know, these neighborhoods like you're talking about right now, I mean, if all the owners got together and said, let's just clear cut, there's nothing in our code to stop them from doing that. They don't even need to come get a permit from us.
So what made this ordinance come up? Was there an incident?
No, it's just something that was talked about at the staff level, and it came down to us directed to, okay, go ahead and draft something up so that it can go to city council for discussion. I mean, city council may get this and get it, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. It was staff initiated.
It's responsible planning, well done.
What's
Good,
that?
I'm saying responsible planning, well done.
Yes, thank you.
I see here also that it says something about trimming, so you gotta get a permit to trim it too?
That's the intention with these, yes, because, you know, we've talked to a lot of arborists around this thing, and there's a lot of people who will do their own tree trimming. And they end up killing trees by doing so, or they will trim it down so much that it is extremely top-heavy, and that makes the root structure become very unstable. So the intent on these things being such large trees, we really want to make sure that, it's not, I mean, if you want to come in and get a permit to go out there and trim a heritage tree, we're just going to issue you the permit to an arborist who can go do that. What we don't want to do, though, is have just people out there doing these things willy-nilly, and then, they go and they cut off 90% of the tree branches, and then they go in and get an arborist and say, hey, can you come look at this? And they're going to be like, well, yeah, that's super unstable now. And then so we're trying to just make sure we've got good tree practice going on with these.
Okay, so my question is, how are you going to inform the public? I happen to live in a neighborhood where there's a ton of these trees. So how do you make the neighborhood, how do you make the community aware that this ordinance is in fact in place?
There will be public outreach with this, I can assure you of that. We'll work with Devin, our public affairs officers, get some stuff out on Facebook and stuff like that. But one of the biggest thing with this one is going to be working with the actual tree companies in the area, the people who go do this stuff. We've got relationships with most of them because most of them are doing all the commercial tree removal as well. Because like I said, there's not too many just overnight organizations out there that are going to go and try to take out 30-inch trees. They've got to have their right insurance and everything else to do that, to make sure they're not damaging other properties and everything else with
Well,
that.
I'm going to tell you.
So working with them to make sure they understand that this is going to require a permit.
So I've got at
basically
least
get them-
half a dozen of these trees on my property. So my question is this, so anytime I want to do trimming, which in the past I try to keep it trimmed up with canopy and get an arborist in there. So is there a charge for the permitting to have this trimmed every couple of years?
There is a land, what's it called, a land,
We don't want to discourage people from trimming either, because it also helps from hurricanes.
oh, 100%. Yeah, if what's it called? I forget, I've got it written in here. A land site work permit is what we call it, and it is a value-based permit. So really the amount is going to depend on what it is. So for example, if a tree company's going to come out and they're going to charge you, $2,000 to do the trimming, that's going to drive the cost of that permit. If it's $5,000, the permit's going to be more. A lot of that is driven by Florida statute. There's some permit fees that are just required to be charged for surcharges and permit processing fees that we collect but go straight to the state. And that's Florida statute requires us to pull those. So there will be some fees associated with it. It will not be exorbitant amounts of fees. So we're talking, maybe a couple $100.
Okay.
And but that has to be through an arborist. Like I can't go out there, like I rent a lift truck every couple of years and trim all the palm trees.
A lot of folks do.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, especially the palms.
And there's nothing in here that prevents that. It just, we want to make sure that permit is in there, so that way we can just make sure this is being done responsibly.
So I'm going back to what she asked, how do people know they have to get a permit?
And then we'll be doing the public outreach on this stuff. I mean, it's just like any new policy that we do. We put shit out there as much as we possibly can on social media, every public meeting that we can find, we'll discuss it at those types of things.
And this is a code enforcement issue, so if somebody's trimming their trees without a permit, code enforcement's getting involved.
Theoretically, yes. Typically with code enforcement, especially with new rules like this, it's more going to be of, hey, stop, come in and get your permit.
But again, it's only this tree, that's only these trees. Like I said, I do my palms. I have 30 palms on my property.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's no.
Zero restriction
But
on
if
that.
I come across and, there's that oak, there's a branch on the oak.
We're talking the 30-inch.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's
Diameter breast height.
A
increasing.
lot of those where we live.
Yeah, it's encroaching on the palms, some of the oak. So I try and trim around it a little bit, cut that oak just off to keep the palms growing up. But that technically would need a permit by this, what you're saying.
That's kind of difficult. Not everyone knows what tree species are. I think.
That's true too.
That's a valid argument.
Yeah, I was looking through.
Yeah, apparently I have 3 different kinds of oaks, and I thought they were all the same.
Which I think there's 5 oaks in all, if you look at all three
There's a ton of
tables,
oaks.
right? On the table, there's 5 different types of oaks on the table.
Arborists, we use one of the.
And that's not even all of them that are Florida friendly.
What?
It's just the ones that, I mean, this
Sure
table has
did.
been in
We
the
tried
code
to
for a long
encourage us
time.
to get rid of all of our water.
Yeah, sometimes they can grow fast and then a hurricane can knock the branches and they'll get hollow sometimes.
You know, there'll be that one stray branch that starts encroaching on the house, and it's just basically a trail for the squirrels to get on the roof.
Cut it on the weekend.
Hope your neighbors don't turn into it.
I was going to Palms.
I think they could make a recommendation that the permit have no fee attached to it, Tim. You can have no, like, permits without any fee whatsoever if for trimming. If you want people to comply with it, because that was a point that you all brought up,
Well-
that why would you want
That's my biggest thing. We don't want to discourage the
Yeah.
community from
Do a
trimming.
little more
Keep
research
trees
on that
healthy
one, because, like I said, the state of Florida has 3 different fees for every permit that the city issues, building permit that the city issues. There are 3 fees that get paid to the state, period. I don't know that we have the authority to say, well, you don't
Does the
need to
state
pay
need to
those.
get paid to trim trees?
So that's what I'm saying, some of those fees, as far as like city fees, yeah, we don't have anything specifically established for this. Like I said, typically it would probably just be under that land site work. But if the intention is that we just do this as cheap as possible and only charge the Florida required fees, I mean, that's a
I
possibility.
mean, I understand if you're talking about cutting off a 12-inch branch off of an oak. Yeah, I get that. You don't want to do that. But if I'm talking about like, 2-inch branch at the most.
And I understand, but where do you draw that line? I mean, how do you know what people are doing? And that's where if you come in to get a permit and you say, oh, I'm gonna be cutting off all of these 12-inch branches off of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, then
hold
I'll
on,
get
you know.
somebody to come in.
But if I'm just gonna trim and shape it, okay, cool. I mean, so that's really all it is just really to start that conversation, have that conversation so we don't have people out there just killing these trees, whether accidentally or on purpose. I know we do have a lot of people who go out there and they over prune trees. Palm trees honestly are the one that probably get over pruned the most. And they end up unstable and they die or they fall down, which is what we definitely don't want.
So the ordinance itself doesn't actually identify the fee schedule, correct?
Correct. We never write, like in the land development code, you're never going to see fees in there, just because fees can change. So really, those are managed through the comprehensive fee schedule. I mean, that fee schedule has everything from how much you're going to pay to rent items from the rec center or reserve a spot in the park, to how much you're paying for water and sanitation, to your business. It's a comprehensive, complete list of all the fees that the city charges.
Any more questions?
Does this, do these fees apply to like utility companies that have to go trim trees?
That's a good question.
There's actually a state statute that they have, if you're talking about in the right-of-way areas, there's a state statute that allows them to basically cut all that without even getting permission but they'll try to get permission to work with the local governmental entity, but if the local governmental entity tries to say no, they can still just go start clear cutting it.
Yeah, they murdered trees.
Yeah.
And they can do that on private property as well.
They can,
That's
well,
correct.
it's a little bit more limited on the private property, but in the right-of-ways, they just have carte blanche to cut it all out, so, yeah.
Or they do it on the private as well?
Well, they do, if it's on the easement, but they have
Yeah.
a little bit more liability, though.
Tim, does the city have people that go and trim trees?
We do, we have a right-of-way maintenance crew that goes out there and does a lot of that stuff. Most of it, any of the power line work and some of that is gonna be done by FPL.
How do we,
So my question to you is this: if we approve this ordinance or recommend approval of this ordinance, then it's going to include tree trimming of any sort at this point on a residential property as well?
Tree trimming of heritage trees,
Correct,
yes.
correct. Okay.
So get it done before this goes into effect.
I'm sorry?
So get it done before this goes into effect.
I mean, and this is where, this is exactly why this body exists. If that's something you feel should be different,
Well, and I'd like
if you
to
want
know-
to make that motion and have that presented as council, as a, this is what your decision was to remove that part of it,
I'm more inclined to table it until you come back and let us know if it is in state statute that it's required for even tree trimmings.
It's not in state statute. It's not required in state statute for that. Right now, the state statute doesn't even require us to protect these at all. It's allowable for us to protect these. The only thing state statute does is restrict us from requiring a permit or fees for a tree that has been deemed unsafe by an arborist.
Okay.
That's the only restriction in state statute. So we can either do nothing and let them just go out there and cut these down at will, prune at will, or whatever.
Well, we could approve this with a change such that there's no fee. Could we state that there's no fee for residential tree trimming? A permit's still required.
Within accordant, subject to any limitations of Florida law, that you would like it to be
Okay, that's what I
rewritten
was
with
asking.
no fee. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to see something just define the pruning, like a branch X, you know, maybe a top to an arborist or something, you know. You can't cut down a tree that's split, you know, how they split, you know, two 15-inch branches. I want to cut one of them off. Well, it's going to make the other side kind of heavy.
Right.
So, you know, I get that. But like I said, if I'm taking off 4-inch branches that are overhanging the house, does that really hurt you? I mean, heck, I did that once and it's grew back.
It's gonna hurt your house more than the tree.
I don't know how much an arborist costs, but I mean, they would have to go get an arborist every single time they trim.
And
That's
that's kind of what the
pricey.
intent
That could be
here is
pricey.
to get people who know what they're doing with these trees so that they're not, and that's where that permit comes in, is just because we don't want people, you know, I know you're saying like, oh, nobody would, you know, go out and cut that 15.
Somebody would.
It'll
Somebody
happen.
would.
And as soon as we don't say, oh, well, you don't need it for pruning, they're gonna do that and then be like, oh, oops, now it's dying.
There's
You're-
more arborists than you realize though too, because I've actually written a couple of these in other cities as well, and I've been involved in litigation over the dangerous tree statute actually before. And there's not only there's free arborists that you can use through the IFAS extension, which is University of Florida. They'll come out in like a week or two. You can get it sooner though. Most of the tree companies, the bigger ones, have multiple arborists on staff, and usually the owners happen to be arborists too. It's kind of odd. So that is one thing. It's a lot easier to find the arborist because the state statute says you can use an arborist or a licensed landscape architect. They're a lot more rare to find those because they can also do it too. But and that's actually expensive to get an architect. But arborists, actually, I've been surprised over the years. There's a lot more arborists.
I guess it just also concerns, you know, I can Google how to trim my tree, and you can find all kinds of, you know, do-it-yourself things on how to do it. And like you said, if you let somebody do it, they could go in there, I just follow the instructions and cut it down.
You can also get two arborists, it will say two very opposite things.
True, true.
I mean, it really could go either way. I mean, I get it, you know, yes, I'm a YouTuber as well, and I try to fix things. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you end up having to take it to somebody to fix what you tried to fix. And ultimately, that's where this is around. I mean, these trees are, you know, can be very delicate. If you prune them wrong, you can kill the whole tree, and now it becomes a real danger.
Any other questions? All right, do we have a motion or comments?
I'll make a motion to accept ordinance, and this is 2177, amending LDC Chapter 4 Development Standards.
As presented.
And had you indicated you wanted to include no fee for trimming if legal?
Right, for residential, correct. And that's all this refers to, is the residential, correct?
No, this will also apply to any commercial property that have the heritage trees on it.
Okay.
But you can specify that, you know.
Yeah, we can specify
We
that
can
no
limit
fees for residential.
trimming, so.
Yes.
And I want to make sure I understand, you're talking no permit fees, like the actual mitigation.
I
cost.
still think we need to have permits, but no permit fees. And we can even go so far as to say on, what do you call it? residential homesteaded properties, because there's a lot of rental properties out there also that have nice trees on them, so.
But
I don't know
when you
quite
say no fees,
how-
you're talking for the permit, not
For
the
the-
$5,000 mitigation.
Correct, no, I'm just talking for the permit strictly for trimming of the trees, not for taking them down.
Okay,
And we're saying this is per tree,
that is correct.
not per property. See, I'd like to see something per property, because if I'm trimming trees,
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna do more than one if I have more than one on my property.
The $5,000 only comes in if you're completely removing a tree.
No, I
There's no
mean-
mitigation cost for pruning a tree.
But
I mean, for, not mitigation, but a permit.
The permit.
Yeah, no, it would be one property. If
Okay.
you've got 50 trees on there, you come and get one permit to trim all 50 trees, it's
Okay.
one permit.
Okay. So right now, your motion is as it's written, correct, Mr. Randall?
Right, but my understanding is that if it's seconded, then we can actually discuss amending it.
Or you can make a substitute motion
Until there's a
before.
motion, you can't
Okay.
amend something that
Right.
doesn't have a motion to put it in play.
Okay,
So I was making the motions, get it second, then you can amend it, then you vote on
which is a
the
whole nother
change.
motion.
Right, but
Okay,
it's- this is
so
the
if this
first
motion
step.
dies, then somebody else can make a motion with those amendments.
There's two ways that you can do it, his way or that way. There's multiple
Okay.
pathways to the same ultimate conclusion.
Okay,
So you can-
gotcha. Okay.
So is somebody, Ms. Wilson, were you amending or doing a subsequent motion?
Yeah, but do I need to second it first?
No, you can do a substitute motion before anyone seconds the motion. So.
Okay. Well, I'd like to do, it's called a subsequent motion.
Substitute, like a substitute teacher.
I'd like to do a substitute motion such that we approve, recommend approval of ordinance 2177 with the modification such that there be no permit fees for residential trimming of homesteaded properties.
I will second.
Can I ask to clarify, no
Permitting fees.
fees that are not statutorily required by the state of Florida?
I'll change it to
Okay.
that, yes, sir.
That's exactly what we're thinking.
Yes, sir. That's what I meant to say, right.
I mean, that's what I heard.
Okay. Yes.
Was there any other discussion after Mr. McPherson's second and Ms. Wilson's motion? Y'all ready to vote?
Any public comments?
Sorry.
Are we doing this before we vote?
Well, you have to do public comments before you vote.
Okay, public, anybody? No, nothing heard?
No.
So quiet.
Okay, motion carries. Now we want to talk about it. Is there anything? we
Any
want
plans
to
or
discuss?
reports? Are we moving to the next item?
I think so. Yeah, we don't have any further discussion on that?
No, pass, the
Already
substitute
voted.
motion passes. Yeah.
All right. Supervisor reports?
Anybody this time?
No, can I just ask something about an unrelated topic from tonight?
Of course.
It's not really a report, but do we have any kind of ordinance against having chickens in residential areas?
We do. Well, there's an ordinance that allows for,
No
I
roosters.
believe it's up to 6 chickens. There's
No
there's rules for
roosters. We have
smell
this.
and how the coop has to be done. No roosters are allowed. They're supposed to be registered with the city.
So you
Um,
can have chickens?
You can
Because
have
the
up to
last
6.
I looked, I
I
thought
want to
it
say
was,
it's up to 6, but
Okay.
I can verify that.
I
feel like we had
Isn't
this
it based
meeting.
on the size of the property?
It's not, it's
It's
just,
not,
it's just
okay.
a straight number.
when did that come, was there, because,
I seem to remember
Is that a-
this. Talking about this a couple of years ago, yeah.
okay, because it's been a while since I looked, but I know one point I looked and it said that chickens were not allowed, so I didn't
Are you gonna
realize.
get some chickens?
I was thinking about it. Probably say
I mean, eggs are so crazy.
No roosters, that's all.
Okay, all right, that's all I wanted.
All right, any other board member reports?
I do have a question.
I have a question.
So while we're talking about trees, we had a couple months ago, a lady come here talk about trees, planting and stuff like that. One of them was to,
Good tree city thing.
yeah, it was, one of the ones was to, dedicate a tree to Kendra Stahl's father, I believe. You kind of vaguely what we were talking about?
I remember Ashley Sikowski came in here.
Arbor Day
Yeah.
proclamation, Ashley's presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Was a tree dedicated to,
There were two
That's-
trees
wasn't
dedicated.
Marlo, was
It was Lieutenant Kendra Stalls, I believe.
Right, what was her father's name, too?
I forgot what her father's name was.
And there was the 2 trees dedicated. One was actually to Ashley's mother, who was a longtime city employee. And I think that's the other one that was dedicated.
Okay, so it's been done.
That has been.
Okay.
Are
that's-
they in
okay.
Sari Park? They both at Sari
I,
Park?
I don't,
I'd have to
that was
go
Parks and
look.
Rec did that. I'm not familiar with all the details on that.
I just didn't know if it was done or not.
I'm sorry?
I didn't know if it was done or not, I didn't know.
There's a picture of it, too.
I saw it on our Facebook page.
I saw it on Facebook.
That's all I know about is what I saw on there.
That counts.
So are we moving forward on the Tree City thing?
I'm sorry?
Are we moving forward on the Tree City thing?
That is the plan. It's actually in our comprehensive plan that says we will do that. I think you mentioned Ashley did come in and do that presentation. Unfortunately, Ashley has moved on to other opportunities for her, and that's where the application was. So we're going to have to, I'm short of staff, I remember right now, and we're trying to keep up, and that is out there as a goal to get that done.
Tim, I do have a question. So I think you and I have sort of talked about this. Florida DOT is responsible for Eglin Parkway, 98, and Beale, right?
Correct.
Are you tracking anything being in motion to fix the potholes on Eglin Parkway? They are swallowing my car. And the more it rains, the worse those get.
Day is new.
I'm not. What I will say, and I can try to get you more details on this one, I know our Public Works Department does track a lot of that stuff. There is a system out there now called C-Click Fix, that's been advertised out there somewhere.
I've used it.
For social media and stuff. If you report stuff through there, that goes directly to our Public Works Department that can then interface with DOT on a lot of those things, or it's one that they can fix themselves potentially.
So there's the potholes and then there's the bridges. So the bridges are the same way. The cracks, the joists in the bridges are getting very bad to where, like, I've got a brand new truck and it swallows my truck.
Yeah, I think my shocks actually replaced on my truck.
So,
Yeah, I would say just all of that reported on C-Click Fix to Public Works, and then they're the ones who have the connections and contact with DOT. Again, it's DOT, so we have zero control over them or what they do. But I know our Public Works Department is the ones who have the contacts with them.
So we all need to start writing letters to DOT?
Well,
And your county commissioners too. So the county commission stuck
That's
most
true.
of their money's going to the north end for all the roads. They have a discretionary amount of money they could direct. And they say it's in 2026 is when they're actually going to start. I know they've been saying Eglin is coming up.
I can help with that. I actually sit
Okay.
on the Okaloosa-Walton County Transportation
There you go.
Planning Organization.
Fantastic.
So,
I'm on the TCC for them.
right, so 2026, I believe, is when Eglin is supposed to be completely resurfaced. At our last meeting, which was about 2 weeks ago, the potholes on Eglin were discussed. It has been a recurring topic. Weber is the company that has the contract. They were out there today working on some of the potholes. So it is known, it has been talked about. Now, the spacing on the spans for the bridge isn't something that we've talked about at the TPO. There's a virtual meeting on March 19th. If you go to the website, which is ecrc.org, which stands for Emerald Coast Regional Council, you can certainly put your comments in there, and I would encourage people to use that website. And the meeting on March 19th is to discuss the transportation plans for the next 5 years. And public comment is certainly welcome. But the condition of Eglin is a constant topic. There's some funding constraints with Weber. They're doing the best they can. they were only allocated so much money, and they're pretty much up to the end of that, and it's a losing battle trying to keep Eglin Parkway pothole-free. But they were out there today, and that, to me, was a direct result of the meeting that we had about 10 days ago.
Well, it just kills me. It seems like they're, and again, I don't know all the backstories,
Right.
but they're picking and choosing where they're putting money on Eglin Parkway. Like in Shalimar, they redid that intersection.
Right.
It's like, okay, there are worse parts of Eglin than that four-way intersection. Why did they choose that
Right,
versus something
and
else?
that was not explained to us at the meeting. That was one of the issues of, why that particular intersection, and it was, that's FDOT telling them that specific spot needed to be reworked.
So that was DOT that
The
mandated
well, the intersection right by the annex,
right?
that's beyond filling potholes. So DOT directed that, but
Fix the
pothole
drainage on
maintenance
it.
is something that whoever's supposed to do on
What
it.
about Hollywood Boulevard? Is that ours or is that?
What time is that meeting at?
The west
One
end of Hollywood
On
Boulevard.
March 19th at 1 o'clock
It's
is
a virtual meeting.
the planning meeting that's virtual. But you can go to the website, or the phone number for the CAC TPO is 850-393-8040. And they'll take telephone.
They will, and I want to clarify though,
Right.
that meeting is to discuss the priorities list.
Yes, yes.
Now, stuff as far as like, there's potholes here,
Right.
that is not what the intent is.
Right,
This
right.
is basically, there's the 2045 long-range transportation plan that has identified all the needs for the entire area for the next, obviously, till 2045. And then it's basically ranking those priorities as to,
Right.
what do we want to say to DOT? This is what we feel is most important to least important
Right.
out there. What that meeting is really to discuss those priorities
Right.
out there.
Like turning
So, yes,
285 into a four-way
At those
highway?
meetings, there is representatives from DOT, Mr. Falk, I believe, is
Right.
probably the one there. And yeah, he will take those information back and everything like that, but the intent of that meeting is just to discuss the priorities for where that funding is gonna go, for what we as a TPO are recommending.
Right, and I don't know if repaving Eglin is on that list or not. I'd have to go look at it. I think it's already in the plan, so it's not going to be on the future plan. But the ECRCwebsite.org, that certainly is a venue to use to complain about the status of Eglin Parkway.
On these, like this future Eglin repaving or whatever, do they take into the account like the drainage, the water drainage?
Yeah, it's
Well,
it's
yeah, I don't know if that's ever going to be solved.
Concave.
Unless you raise that road 2 feet and put a bevel on it and increase the ability to move
just putting
water.
Band-Aids on it.
I don't think Eglin Parkway is ever going to be,
Okay, I was just curious.
yeah, I'm not an engineer in any way, shape, or form, but
They do get into engineering of projects when, like, around the mountain. That will be engineered for stormwater and everything like that. When it comes to just a repaving project, I don't believe they do any kind of major engineering into it. When you get things like with the around the mountain project, we're talking about a couple of miles of road, and you're talking, several years and several $1 million just to engineer and design that. If they were to do that for every repaving, that would become very cost prohibitive very quickly.
They did do something on the last repaving, though. I remember in the late 2000s, they did a major repaving then. It used to be much worse. Like this storm, like growing up, like the water out there, and they did fix it because it used to be like the entire stretch of Eglin Parkway once you started going north from 98.
yeah, I mean,
It was all water.
we all drove on the dirt road
Yeah.
for 2 years through
But
Shalimar,
it is a little bit better now, but I don't, like I said, I don't know how much better they can make it at this point because there's nowhere for the water to go. Really.
And one of the questions was who is in charge of Hollywood, because that's another bad one.
The city.
That's the city. Well, depending on where.
West
Between
Areas are
Eglin and Beale.
Yeah, I even the west side that goes down to Bay.
Yeah, they tore that up.
That's the city, yeah, and if there's issues on there, see Click Fix, that'll get them over to Public Works, and that is the city maintained road there.
And then we could get
That's
some
actually-
traffic lights to sync. Do we not have a traffic light engineer to sync up some of the lights?
So traffic light is managed by the county, all the timing and everything in there. There's
He's got a
actually
PhD.
a PhD that works on that. That takes their timing very seriously. And I
We all
believe
found
that-
out when I'm used.
Give that email address out too.
I don't know that. I just know that is managed at the county level for all traffic lights in the entire county. Even the DOT ones, they manage all the timing and everything for them.
Thank you.
Any other? That's the most we've ever talked about.
A lot of complaints.
Anything else? I'm done. All right.
Amber, do you want us to shut these computers off, or do you do?